Your consciousness is not what you think it is. Not neurons firing, not electrical signals, not chemical reactions, not computation. Your brain uses quantum mechanics, uses superposition, uses entanglement, uses wave function collapse. At the smallest scales inside your neurons, quantum processes are happening. Right now, as you read this, tiny structures smaller than wavelength of light are maintaining quantum coherence, existing in superposition, multiple states simultaneously. And when these quantum states collapse, when superposition resolves into definite outcome, consciousness emerges, a moment of awareness, a flash of experience. This is not speculation. This is not mysticism. This is orchestrated objective reduction, Orch-OR, a scientific theory proposed by Roger Penrose, one of the greatest physicists alive, and Stuart Hameroff, anesthesiologist and consciousness researcher. They claim consciousness is fundamentally quantum, that your brain is a quantum computer, that every thought, every sensation, every moment of awareness emerges from quantum collapse in structures called microtubules inside your neurons. And the evidence? Anesthesia. The drugs that turn consciousness off. They work by disrupting quantum coherence in microtubules, by preventing superposition, by stopping quantum collapse. No quantum collapse, no consciousness. You go under. Awareness disappears. You cease to exist temporarily. Then when anesthesia wears off, quantum coherence returns, collapse resumes, and you wake up. Consciousness restored. This correlation is not coincidence. It is proof. Proof that consciousness requires quantum mechanics, that your brain operates in the quantum realm, that thinking is quantum process. And if this is true, if Penrose and Hameroff are correct, then everything we thought we knew about consciousness is wrong. Begin with the hard problem, the problem that will not go away, the problem David Chalmers identified in the 1990s. Why is there subjective experience? Why does it feel like something to be conscious? You can explain brain function, neurons firing, signals propagating, information processing, pattern recognition, memory storage. All the cognitive functions can be explained mechanistically. How the brain takes input, processes it, produces output, behavior. These are the easy problems of consciousness. Not actually easy, enormously complex, but solvable in principle. Neuroscience makes progress, maps circuits, identifies regions, correlates activity with function, understands mechanisms, but explaining function is not explaining consciousness, not explaining experience, not explaining qualia, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the taste of coffee, the sound of music. Why does processing information feel like anything? Why is there an inner life? A first-person perspective? Something it is like to be you? This is the hard problem, and neuroscience cannot solve it, cannot explain why physical processes produce subjective experience, cannot bridge the gap between objective description and subjective feeling. The explanatory gap remains. No matter how much we learn about neurons, we do not explain consciousness. We explain correlates. Brain activity correlated with consciousness. But correlation is not explanation. We see what happens in the brain when you are conscious, but we do not know why that activity feels like anything, why there is experience at all. This is the hard problem. Unsolved, perhaps unsolvable by classical neuroscience, because classical physics describes objective reality, third-person facts, and consciousness is subjective, first-person, private, inaccessible from outside. You cannot measure my experience, cannot observe my qualia, can only measure brain activity. Objective correlates, but not the experience itself. The gap remains. Roger Penrose thinks the gap exists because we are using the wrong physics. Classical physics cannot explain consciousness. Quantum mechanics can, must, because quantum mechanics already has something strange, something non-computational, something that might relate to consciousness. Wave function collapse. In quantum mechanics, systems exist in superposition until measured, multiple states simultaneously. Electron, in many places at once. Photon polarized in all directions, cat alive and dead. Then measurement, observation, and collapse. Superposition resolves. One outcome, definite state. This is mysterious. The equations do not explain collapse. Schrödinger equation describes smooth evolution. Deterministic, no collapse. Collapse is added. Extra rule. When measurement occurs, wave function collapses, randomly, probabilistically. But what is measurement? What counts as observation? This is measurement problem. Unsolved. Copenhagen interpretation says measurement causes collapse but does not define measurement. Many worlds says no collapse. Universe splits. Collapse is illusion. Pilot wave says particles always definite. No real collapse. These are interpretations, not solutions. The problem remains. Collapse is real or not? If real, what causes it? Penrose has an answer. Objective collapse, not caused by observation, not caused by consciousness, caused by gravity. By space-time geometry. When superposition involves different mass distributions, different space-time curvatures, gravity cannot sustain the superposition. It becomes unstable, collapses spontaneously. This is objective reduction. OR. Collapse caused by objective physical process, not subjective observation. Penrose developed the mathematics, showed that quantum gravity requires objective collapse. Superposition of different space-time geometries is unstable, decoheres, collapses, on timescale related to mass difference. Larger mass difference, faster collapse. This is testable. Predicts collapse rate for given mass. And Penrose noticed something. The collapse is non-computable, cannot be simulated by algorithm, cannot be reduced to Turing machine, involves something beyond computation. And consciousness, human thought, understanding, insight also seems non-computable. Gödel's theorem shows there are mathematical truths we can understand, but cannot prove algorithmically. Human mathematicians see truth that algorithms cannot reach. This suggests consciousness is not computation, not classical algorithm, not Turing machine, but something else, something non-computable, like quantum collapse. Penrose proposed that consciousness involves quantum collapse, that moments of awareness correspond to objective reduction events, or events in the brain. Where? How? Classical neuroscience says brain is too warm, too wet, too noisy. Quantum coherence impossible. Decoherence happens in femtoseconds, faster than neurons fire, faster than thought. So quantum mechanics cannot be relevant to brain function, must be classical. This is standard view. But Stuart Hameroff disagreed. As anesthesiologist, he studied how anesthesia works, how tiny molecules turn consciousness off. And he noticed something. Anesthetics bind to protein structures inside neurons, not to receptors on neuron surface, not to synapses, but to cytoskeleton, internal scaffolding of cell, specifically to microtubules. These are cylindrical structures made of protein subunits called tubulin. Each neuron contains millions of microtubules. They maintain cell shape, transport materials. But Hameroff suspected they do more. Suspected they process information. Because microtubules are incredibly organized, regular, geometric. Each tubulin subunit can switch between conformations, two states, like bit, 0 or 1, and tubulins are arranged in perfect lattice, hexagonal pattern, repeating, crystalline. This looked like information processing substrate, like molecular computer, classical computer perhaps. But Hameroff noticed something else. Anesthetics affect consciousness by binding to microtubules, interfering with tubulin state changes. This suggested microtubules are substrate of consciousness, where consciousness happens. And if consciousness is quantum as Penrose proposed, then microtubules must support quantum coherence, must maintain superposition. Despite being warm, wet biological structures, this seemed impossible. But Hameroff was not deterred, started investigating whether quantum coherence could exist in microtubules. The structure of microtubules is remarkable. Hollow cylinders, about 25 nanometers in diameter, made of 13 columns of tubulin dimers. Each dimer has 2 conformational states, can switch, can oscillate, but the switching is not independent. Tubulins are coupled, connected through hydrophobic pockets, through London forces, through quantum mechanical interactions. When one tubulin switches, it affects neighbors, creates patterns, waves, collective oscillations. This is classical picture, information processing in microtubules. But Hameroff and Penrose went further, proposed that tubulin states are not just classical, not just 0 or 1, but quantum, superposition, 0 and 1 simultaneously. Each tubulin in superposition of both conformations. And because tubulins are coupled, their superpositions entangle, create coherent quantum state across entire microtubule. Thousands of tubulins entangled. In collective superposition, this is quantum computer, microtubule as quantum processor. But can this be real? Can biological structure at room temperature maintain quantum coherence? Classical physics says no. Decoherence too fast, environment too noisy, quantum states collapse immediately, cannot survive. But Penrose and Hameroff argued that microtubules have special properties, protection mechanisms, that allow quantum coherence despite warm, wet environment. First, the hollow interior is isolated, shielded, water molecules excluded, hydrophobic regions protect from environment. Second, the tubulins are ordered, crystalline arrangement. This suppresses certain types of noise, creates quantum channels, pathways where coherence can propagate. Third, the coupling between tubulins is strong. Collective effects stabilize superposition, like quantum error correction. Redundancy protects information. These factors together might allow quantum coherence on biologically relevant timescales. Milliseconds. Long enough for neural processing, long enough for consciousness. Hameroff proposed that quantum states in microtubules process information, perform quantum computation, much faster than classical, much more powerful, quantum parallelism. Superposition allows exploring many possibilities simultaneously. Entanglement allows non-local correlations. Quantum algorithms solve certain problems exponentially faster than classical algorithms. If brain uses quantum computation in microtubules, it could explain cognitive abilities that seem beyond classical computation. Pattern recognition, intuition, creativity, understanding. These might require quantum processing, might require accessing quantum parallelism. This is Hameroff's contribution. Microtubules as quantum computers. But this does not explain consciousness, does not solve hard problem. Quantum computation is still computation, still information processing, still objective. Third person. Does not explain subjective experience. Why quantum computation feels like anything. This is where Penrose's objective reduction comes in. Penrose proposed that consciousness is not the quantum computation, not the superposition, not the processing. Consciousness is the collapse, the moment when superposition resolves, when OR occurs, when quantum state becomes definite. That moment, the collapse, is moment of consciousness, flash of awareness, subjective experience. This is the key idea. Consciousness is not computation. Consciousness is collapse. Quantum to classical transition. And it happens not through observation, not through measurement, but through objective reduction, through quantum gravity, through space-time instability. Here is how it works according to Orch-OR. Microtubules maintain quantum coherence. Superposition of tubulin states. This superposition grows. More tubulins become entangled. Superposition spreads across microtubule network, across many microtubules in neuron, across many neurons. Large-scale quantum state, coherent, entangled, but this superposition involves mass. Different tubulin conformations have slightly different mass distributions, slightly different positions of atoms, and different mass distributions mean different space-time curvatures, different geometries. The superposition is superposition of different space-times. And Penrose's theory says this is unstable. Gravity cannot sustain superposition of different geometries. They interfere, create instability. And after critical threshold, when difference in space-time curvature reaches, Planck scale collapse occurs, objective reduction, superposition resolves, one geometry becomes actual, one mass distribution, one tubulin configuration. This is OR event. And Penrose and Hameroff claim this is moment of consciousness. The collapse is experience, the resolution is awareness. Quantum to classical transition creates qualia, creates the feeling of being conscious. Why? They do not fully explain, do not derive experience from collapse, but they propose that collapse is inherently experiential, that the process of resolving superposition, of selecting one outcome from many, has subjective character, feels like something, is something, from inside. This is radical claim, equates physical process with consciousness, says they are same thing, not correlated, not parallel, but identical. Collapse is consciousness. Consciousness is collapse. The timing is important. How fast does collapse occur? Penrose calculated. Based on mass difference, based on Planck scale. For typical microtubule network in neuron, collapse should occur on timescale of tens of milliseconds, 20 to 40 milliseconds. This matches neural timescale, matches conscious perception. Brain processes information in chunks, snapshots, discrete moments, about 40 Hz, 25 milliseconds per cycle. Conscious perception is not continuous, not smooth, but discrete. Series of snapshots, frames, like movie, 40 frames per second. And Orch-OR predicts this, predicts that consciousness occurs in discrete events. Each OR event is one moment of awareness, one frame of experience, 40 times per second. This is testable prediction, and EEG measurements show 40 Hz oscillations correlated with consciousness. Gamma band. When you are conscious aware, attentive gamma oscillations are present. When you are unconscious asleep, anesthetized gamma disappears. This correlation supports Orch-OR, suggests 40 Hz oscillations reflect OR events, quantum collapse creating moments of consciousness. But correlation is not proof. Other explanations exist. Classical neural oscillations at 40 Hz, synchronized firing, binding different features into unified percept. Standard neuroscience explanation does not require quantum mechanics, does not require objective reduction. Penrose and Hameroff need stronger evidence, need to show quantum mechanics is necessary. that classical explanations fail, and they claim to have this. Anesthesia. Anesthesia is mystery. We use it every day, millions of surgeries. But we do not fully understand how it works, how small molecules turn consciousness off. Many different anesthetics exist, different chemical structures, different properties, but all produce same effect: loss of consciousness, reversibly, temporarily. They do not damage brain, do not kill neurons, just stop consciousness, then wear off. Consciousness returns. What is the mechanism? For a long time, believed anesthetics work by affecting neuron membranes, dissolving in lipid bilayer, disrupting electrical properties, making neurons less excitable. But this theory failed. Some molecules dissolve in membranes, but do not anesthetize. Other molecules anesthetize without significant membrane effects. Lipid theory is wrong. Modern research shows anesthetics bind to specific proteins, ion channels, receptors, GABA receptors, NMDA receptors, interfering with synaptic transmission, reducing neural activity. This is current mainstream view. Anesthetics work by blocking synapses, reducing communication between neurons. Brain becomes disconnected. Information cannot integrate. Consciousness disappears. This is plausible, supported by evidence. But Hameroff noticed something. Noticed that anesthetics also bind to microtubules, to tubulin proteins, in hydrophobic pockets, and binding occurs at concentrations relevant to anesthesia, at clinical doses. This is not side effect, not irrelevant binding. This is significant. Moreover, the binding correlates with anesthetic potency. Stronger anesthetics bind more tightly to microtubules. Weaker anesthetics bind less tightly. Perfect correlation. And there is more. Certain noble gases like xenon are potent anesthetics, but noble gases do not bind to receptors, do not affect synapses, are chemically inert, cannot form bonds. Yet they anesthetize. How? The only explanation is physical interaction, van der Waals forces, fitting into hydrophobic pockets, in proteins, and the proteins most affected are tubulins. Xenon fits into tubulin pockets, interferes with conformation changes, disrupts quantum coherence, prevents OR events, no collapse, no consciousness. This is Hameroff's argument. Anesthetics work by targeting microtubules, by disrupting quantum processes, by preventing quantum collapse. And when collapse is prevented, consciousness disappears. This is not just correlation. This is mechanism. This is proof that consciousness requires quantum mechanics in microtubules. The evidence is stronger. Studies show anesthetics affect microtubule dynamics, prevent assembly, cause disassembly, interfere with tubulin polymerization. Exactly what Orch-OR predicts. If quantum coherence depends on microtubule structure, on tubulin arrangement, on hydrophobic pockets, on coupling, then disrupting structure should disrupt consciousness. And anesthetics do this, at concentrations that cause unconsciousness. Furthermore, recovery from anesthesia involves microtubule reassembly, restoration of normal dynamics, and consciousness returns. Timing matches. Microtubule disruption matches loss of consciousness. Microtubule recovery matches return of consciousness. This is strong evidence. But still, not definitive, because anesthetics affect many things. Synapses and microtubules, membranes and proteins, multiple mechanisms, how to isolate microtubule effect, how to show it is necessary. Hameroff performed experiments, tested whether stabilizing microtubules affects anesthesia, used Taxol, drug that stabilizes microtubules, prevents disassembly. If microtubules are substrate of consciousness, Taxol should affect anesthesia, should require higher doses, should alter response, and experiments showed this. Taxol-treated subjects required more anesthetic, were more resistant. Effect was small but significant. Consistent with Orch-OR, consistent with microtubules being relevant to consciousness. But experiments were on simple organisms, worms, not humans, not conclusive. More research needed, but suggestive, pointing toward quantum mechanism. Another line of evidence comes from quantum effects in biology. For decades, biologists assumed quantum mechanics irrelevant to life. Too warm, too wet, too noisy. Quantum effects wash out, everything classical. But recent discoveries change this. Quantum coherence found in photosynthesis. In light harvesting complexes, chlorophyll molecules maintain superposition. Quantum states propagate, transfer energy efficiently. More efficiently than classical. This was shocking. Room temperature, quantum coherence, in biological system, in wet, noisy environment. But it is real, confirmed by multiple experiments. If plants can do it, why not brains? If photosynthesis uses quantum mechanics, why not consciousness? The argument that biology is too warm for quantum effects is refuted. Biology uses quantum mechanics. Evolution discovered it, exploited it, optimized it. Microtubules might be another example, another biological quantum system, evolved to support quantum coherence, to enable quantum computation, to generate consciousness through OR. This is plausible, not proven, but plausible, and evidence is accumulating. Quantum effects in bird navigation. Magnetoreception uses quantum entanglement. Cryptochrome proteins in eyes, entangled electron pairs, sensitive to magnetic fields. Quantum compass in warm, wet bird brain. At room temperature, this is real, confirmed. If birds use quantum mechanics to navigate, perhaps humans use quantum mechanics to think, to be conscious. This is not wild speculation. This is following evidence. Biology is quantum, more quantum than we thought, and brain might be most quantum of all. The implications are vast. If consciousness is quantum collapse in microtubules, then consciousness is physical process, not emergent property, not illusion, but fundamental aspect of physics. Quantum mechanics includes consciousness, requires it. Or events are conscious events. This solves hard problem, explains why there is subjective experience. Because collapse is inherently subjective, has inner aspect, feels like something from inside. This is not dualism, not claiming consciousness is separate from physics, claiming consciousness is part of physics. Quantum collapse has experiential character. Physics itself is experiential at certain scales. This is radical, challenges physicalism, but consistent with physicalism, extends it, says physics includes more than we thought, includes experience, includes qualia, includes consciousness, all part of quantum mechanics, part of objective reduction. This makes consciousness scientifically tractable, testable, falsifiable, can measure microtubule dynamics, can test whether disrupting microtubules disrupts consciousness, can test whether quantum coherence correlates with awareness, can build experiments, make predictions. This is science, not philosophy, not mysticism, testable quantum theory of consciousness, and the test is anesthesia. Anesthesia disrupts quantum processes. Consciousness disappears. This is evidence, not proof, but evidence, strong evidence, that your brain uses quantum mechanics, that consciousness is quantum, that thinking is quantum process. And when quantum collapse stops, when OR events cease, you stop. Consciousness ends, you go under, into darkness, into nothing, until quantum processes resume, until collapse returns, until consciousness is restored. This is what anesthesia shows. This is what Penrose and Hameroff claim. This is Orch-OR, orchestrated objective reduction. Quantum consciousness in your brain, in microtubules, right now. But skeptics remain. Most neuroscientists reject Orch-OR, reject quantum consciousness. Too speculative, too unlikely, not enough evidence, and criticisms are valid. Quantum coherence in brain remains unproven. Decoherence times might be too short. Microtubules might be classical. Anesthetic effects might be entirely synaptic, or might not exist. Might be wrong interpretation of quantum mechanics. Consciousness might be classical emergent property, computational, algorithmic, no quantum needed. These are legitimate concerns. Orch-OR is controversial, not mainstream, not accepted, but not disproven either, not refuted, still possible, still worth investigating. Because if true, everything changes. Our understanding of consciousness, our understanding of brain, our understanding of quantum mechanics, our understanding of reality, all transformed. Consciousness becomes physical. Quantum mechanics becomes conscious. Mind and matter unite. Not separate, not parallel, but one. Quantum process generating experience. Physics, including subjectivity. This is profound, revolutionary, and testable. Anesthesia is the test. Microtubules are the substrate. Quantum mechanics is the mechanism. And your brain, your consciousness operates in the quantum realm, uses superposition, uses entanglement, uses collapse to think, to feel, to be aware. This is what Penrose and Hameroff propose. This is what anesthesia suggests. This is quantum brain. And the next question is, how exactly does it work? How do microtubules orchestrate collapse? How does quantum state grow? How does threshold determine? How does consciousness emerge from OR? The mechanism needs explanation. The details need specification. The theory needs development. And that is where we go deeper, into the orchestration, into the reduction, into the quantum mechanics of thought. The question is not whether consciousness involves quantum mechanics. The question is how. How does superposition build in your brain? How do thousands of tubulin proteins become entangled? How does quantum state grow until it reaches threshold? And what happens at the moment of collapse? What determines when OR occurs? What orchestrates the reduction? This is the orchestration, the Orch in Orch-OR. Because collapse is not random, not arbitrary, not whenever, but precisely timed, precisely triggered, by reaching specific threshold, by achieving specific condition, by satisfying specific criterion. The criterion is gravitational, based on space-time geometry, based on Planck's scale. When quantum superposition involves sufficient mass difference, sufficient space-time, curvature difference, gravitational instability triggers collapse. Objective reduction occurs. This is Penrose's physics. The objective part, the reduction mechanism. But in brain, collapse must be orchestrated, must be controlled, must be integrated with neural activity, must serve cognitive function, cannot be random quantum events scattered throughout brain, must be coordinated, synchronized, organized. This is what microtubules do. They orchestrate, they organize quantum states, build coherence, extend superposition, until threshold, until critical mass, until gravitational criterion satisfied, then collapse, all at once, across microtubule network, across neuron, across neural assembly, synchronized OR event. This creates moment of consciousness. unified experience, integrated awareness, not scattered fragments, not independent collapses, but orchestrated reduction, coordinated, coherent. This is how quantum mechanics becomes conscious, how physics becomes experience. Through orchestration, through precise organization of quantum collapse, and understanding this, understanding the mechanism reveals something disturbing about what you are, about what consciousness is, about what happens every time you think. Begin with the microtubule structure in more detail. Each microtubule is a hollow cylinder made of tubulin dimers. Each dimer consists of alpha-tubulin and beta-tubulin monomers. Two protein subunits bound together. Each monomer has binding site for GTP guanosine triphosphate, energy molecule. When GTP is bound, tubulin is in one conformation. When GTP hydrolyzes to GDP, tubulin switches to different conformation, two states, like bit, on or off, 1 or 0, classical description. But Hameroff and Penrose propose these states are quantum. Each tubulin exists in superposition of both conformations. Not classical bit, quantum bit, qubit. And because tubulins are arranged in lattice 13 columns, spiraling around cylinder, their quantum states can interact, can couple, can entangle. The coupling occurs through several mechanisms. First, direct physical contact. Tubulins touch, share electrons. Electron clouds overlap. This creates quantum correlation. Second, hydrophobic pockets inside tubulin proteins. Water excluding regions. Isolated from environment. These pockets can trap electrons, create quantum states, protected from decoherence. Third, London forces between tubulins. Van der Waals interactions. Quantum mechanical forces. These create coupling, allow superposition to spread from one tubulin to neighbors. Fourth, resonance. When one tubulin oscillates between states, vibration propagates through lattice, like wave. Other tubulins respond, synchronize. This is classical effect but can support quantum coherence, can stabilize superposition across many tubulins. All these mechanisms together allow microtubules to function as quantum systems, to maintain coherence, to build superposition. The superposition grows through a process called quantum tunneling. Tubulins do not classically switch between states, do not require thermal energy to overcome barrier. Instead, quantum mechanically tunnel through barrier. Switch states without crossing activation energy. This is faster, more efficient, and preserves coherence. Classical switching involves interaction with environment, absorbing energy, dissipating heat. This causes decoherence, destroys quantum state. But tunneling bypasses environment, preserves superposition, allows coherent switching. And when many tubulins tunnel coherently in superposition, quantum state extends across microtubule, grows, spreads, becomes more complex, more entangled. This is quantum computation. Information encoded in superposition, processed through quantum gates, through interference, through entanglement. Each microtubule acts as quantum processor, and neurons contain millions of microtubules, networks of quantum processors, all potentially coupled, all potentially entangled. If this is true, each neuron is not just classical computer, is quantum computer, massively parallel, exponentially powerful, capable of processing information in ways classical computer cannot. This might explain cognitive abilities that seem beyond classical computation, might explain understanding, insight, creativity, consciousness. But quantum computation alone does not create consciousness, does not solve hard problem. Consciousness emerges not from computation but from collapse. From the moment when superposition resolves, when quantum becomes classical, when many possibilities become one actuality, this is OR. And orchestrating this collapse, controlling when and how it occurs, is key to consciousness. The orchestration involves several components. First, microtubule-associated proteins, MAPs. These bind to microtubules, regulate dynamics, control polymerization and depolymerization. But Hameroff proposes they also regulate quantum coherence, act as quantum error correction, protect superposition from decoherence, isolate microtubule interior from environment. Some MAPs form barriers, block water, block ions, create quantum-friendly environment. Other MAPs link microtubules together, create networks, allow quantum coherence to extend across multiple microtubules, across neuron, even across neurons through gap junctions. Electrical synapses where neurons connect directly, share cytoplasm, share microtubule networks. This allows superposition to span multiple cells, to create large-scale quantum state, neural assembly in quantum coherence, all participating in single OR event. This is orchestration, organization of quantum state across spatial extent, but there is also temporal orchestration, timing, synchronization. This involves classical neural activity, action potentials, synaptic inputs, dendritic integration. These classical processes modulate microtubule quantum states, prepare them, prime them, build conditions for coherence. When neuron is active, firing, receiving inputs, microtubules respond. Quantum states become more coherent. Superposition grows, approaches threshold. When neuron is quiet, coherence decreases. Superposition shrinks, does not reach threshold. No collapse, no consciousness. This creates link between classical neural activity and quantum process. Classical activity orchestrates quantum state, determines when collapse can occur, ensures collapse happens at right time. During cognitive processing, during perception, during thought, not randomly, not unrelated to mental function, but precisely synchronized with brain activity. This is orchestration. The threshold is crucial. What determines when collapse occurs? Penrose calculated this based on gravitational self-energy. When quantum superposition involves different mass distributions, it creates superposition of space-time geometries, different curvatures. And Einstein's theory says space-time has energy. Gravitational self-energy, energy of space-time curvature itself. When space-time is in superposition, two different curvatures existing simultaneously. Gravitational self-energy is uncertain, indefinite. And Heisenberg uncertainty principle applies to energy in time. Delta E times deltat is greater than or equal to second 2. Uncertainty in energy times uncertainty in time must exceed Planck constant. For space-time superposition, energy uncertainty is gravitational self-energy difference between the two geometries, delta E, G, and this sets timescale. Deltat is approximately equal to 10 delta E, G. Superposition can last at most this long, then becomes unstable, collapses. This is objective reduction, timescale determined by physics, by gravity, by mass difference. For microtubules, Penrose and Hameroff calculated the numbers. Each tubulin dimer has mass about 110 kilodaltons, about 10, negative 22 kilograms. When tubulin switches conformation, mass shifts by nanometer. Different spatial distribution. This creates gravitational self-energy difference, very small, about 10, negative 37 joules. This gives timescale about 10, 7 seconds, 10 million seconds, years, far too long. Single tubulin superposition would never collapse. but this is single tubulin. Microtubules contain thousands of tubulins, and if these are entangled in collective superposition, gravitational self-energy difference multiplies. If n tubulins are in coherent superposition, energy difference is n times larger, and timescale is n times shorter. For 10,000 tubulins, timescale becomes milliseconds. For 100,000 tubulins, becomes 100 microseconds. For million tubulins, becomes 10 microseconds, crossing into biologically relevant regime, into timescales of neural processing, of conscious perception. Hameroff estimated that neurons contain about 7 tubulins, 10 million. If even small fractions, say 1%, are in coherent superposition, that is 100,000 tubulins, enough to produce collapse on millisecond timescale. And if superposition extends across multiple neurons through gap junctions, through dendritic connections, even more tubulins, even faster collapse. The numbers work. The physics allows it. Gravitational awe on neural timescale is possible if microtubules can maintain quantum coherence, if tubulins can entangle, if superposition can extend. These are big ifs, but not impossible, not ruled out, and if true, then brain operates at edge, at threshold, building quantum coherence until gravitational instability triggers collapse, until awe occurs. This is orchestration. Classical neural activity builds coherence. Quantum mechanics maintains superposition. Gravity determines threshold, and collapse creates consciousness. Moment of awareness, flash of experience. This happens about 40 times per second, 40 hertzes, every 25 milliseconds. Or event, quantum to classical transition, creating discrete moment of consciousness, frame of experience. Your continuous awareness is illusion, is actually series of discrete events, snapshots, separated by quantum collapse. You are flickering in and out of existence, 40 times per second. Between collapses you do not exist. No consciousness, no awareness, just quantum superposition, potential, indefinite, then collapse. You exist, aware, conscious, for brief moment, then back to superposition. This cycle repeats, continuously, as long as brain is active, as long as microtubules maintain coherence. This is consciousness according to Orch-OR, not continuous stream, but discrete sequence, quantum events, orchestrated, reduced, creating experience. What exactly happens at collapse? What is the phenomenology? Penrose and Hameroff proposed that collapse is selection, choosing one outcome from superposition of many. Before collapse, all possibilities exist. Superposition of tubulin configurations. Each configuration represents different information state, different computation path, different potential outcome. All exist simultaneously. Quantum parallelism. Then threshold reached. Gravitational instability. Collapse occurs. One configuration selected. Others disappear. Potential becomes actual, and this selection, this choosing, is conscious experience. The resolution feels like something, has subjective character, is awareness. Why? They do not fully explain, do not derive qualia from physics, but they propose that selection process itself, the transition from superposition to definite state, has experiential aspect, that there is something it is like to be the system undergoing collapse, something it is like to resolve indefiniteness into definiteness, to select one outcome from many. This is phenomenology of consciousness, the feeling of deciding, of becoming definite, of being this and not that. And it happens because you are not separate from process. You are the process. You are the microtubules, the neurons, the quantum states, the collapse. You are not observing collapse. You are collapse. The act of reducing superposition is the act of being conscious. They are identical. This is identity theory, not correlation, not causation, but identity. Consciousness is collapse. Collapse is consciousness. Same event, described two ways. Objective description, quantum state reduces to eigenstate. Subjective description, moment of awareness occurs. Both describe same thing. Different perspectives. Third person and first person, objective and subjective. But one event, one process. This solves hard problem, not by reducing consciousness to physics, but by identifying consciousness with physics, showing they are same. Collapse is inherently experiential. Physics at quantum to classical transition includes experience. This is radical. Extends physics. Says physics is not purely objective. Includes subjective aspect. At least at certain transitions. At certain scales. This is Orch-OR's answer to hard problem. But critics object. Say this does not explain anything. Does not explain why collapse feels like anything. Just asserts it, assumes it. Penrose-Hameroff acknowledge this. Admit they do not derive experience from equations, cannot prove collapse is conscious, but they argue no theory can. Cannot derive subjective from objective, cannot cross explanatory gap through logic. Can only identify, show that physical process and conscious experience are same, correlated perfectly, occurring together, inseparable. And if they are same, then understanding physical process is understanding consciousness, not completely, not subjective character, not qualia themselves, but functional role, cognitive role. What consciousness does, how it arises, when it occurs, this is progress, this is explanation, even if incomplete, even if mystery remains, because mystery is smaller, localized. Reduced to single question. Why is collapse experiential? Instead of, why is brain activity experiential? Or, why does anything physical create consciousness? Orch-OR narrows the question. Points to specific process, specific mechanism, specific event, collapse, and says, this is it. This is consciousness. Understand this, and you understand consciousness. Not everything, but something. More than we had. This is scientific progress, and it is testable. Can measure whether collapse occurs in brain, whether quantum coherence exists in microtubules, whether threshold is reached, whether timing matches, whether disruption affects consciousness. These are empirical questions, answerable through experiment, through observation, through measurement. This makes Orch-OR scientific theory, not just philosophical speculation, not just metaphysics, but physics, quantum physics, testable, falsifiable, and some tests are already done. Some evidence exists. Anesthesia is primary evidence, but there is more. Experiments on isolated microtubules show interesting properties. Microtubules conduct electrical signals, act like wires, biological nanowires, propagate voltage changes along length, faster than diffusion, faster than expected from classical ion movement. This suggests quantum tunneling, electrons tunneling through tubulin lattice, conducting signal coherently. Other experiments show microtubules emit photons, biophotons, ultra-weak light emission from biological structures. Microtubules glow, very faintly, measurable with sensitive detectors. Why? One explanation: excited states. Quantum states, electrons in superposition. When collapse occurs, energy releases, photon emitted. This is testable signature. If consciousness involves quantum collapse in microtubules, might see correlation between conscious states and photon emission. between awareness and light. This is speculative, not confirmed, but intriguing, testable. Another line of research: quantum effects in anesthesia. Some experiments show anesthetic molecules affect electron spin, affect quantum states, not just classical binding, but quantum interaction. This supports idea that anesthesia works by disrupting quantum coherence, by interfering with quantum processes, not just with classical synaptic transmission, but with quantum computation in microtubules. If this is true, anesthetic mechanisms provide window into quantum processes in brain, into consciousness, can study how different anesthetics affect quantum states, how they disrupt coherence, how consciousness depends on quantum mechanics. This is ongoing research, not settled, but promising. There is also indirect evidence from cognitive neuroscience. Binding problem. How does brain integrate information from different regions into unified conscious experience? Visual cortex processes color in one area, shape in another, motion in third. How do these separate processes combine into single percept, into unified experience of seeing red ball moving? Classical neuroscience proposes synchronization, neurons firing together, 40 Hz oscillations, gamma band. When different brain regions synchronize fire in phase, their outputs integrate, bind together, create unified representation. This is binding by synchrony hypothesis, well supported. But how does synchronization create unity? How does correlated firing produce single experience? This is hard problem again. Microversion, Orch-OR provides answer. Synchronization at neural level reflects quantum coherence at microtubule level. Different brain regions, different neural assemblies have microtubules in coherent superposition, entangled through gap junctions, through dendritic connections, through quantum tunneling. When these regions synchronize classically, their quantum states also cohere, become single quantum state, spanning multiple neurons, multiple brain areas, and when collapse occurs, when OR happens, it happens across entire network. Simultaneous, unified, single collapse event. This creates single moment of awareness, unified experience. Integration not through classical correlation but through quantum entanglement. Different parts of brain, not just firing together, but existing in single quantum state. This is deeper integration, stronger binding, and explains unity of consciousness, why experience feels unified, seamless, not fragmented, because it arises from single quantum event, single collapse, across distributed network. This is testable. Can measure whether gamma synchronization correlates with quantum coherence markers, with photon emission, with other quantum signatures. If correlation exists, supports Orch-OR. If not, challenges it. This is how science proceeds, through prediction, through test, through evidence. Now consider implications for specific conscious experiences. Pain, for example. What happens in brain when you feel pain? Classical neuroscience. Nociceptors activate. Signals propagate to spinal cord, to thalamus, to cortex. Somatosensory cortex processes location, intensity, anterior cingulate processes, emotional component, suffering. Multiple regions activate, synchronize, create pain experience. But why does this feel like anything? Why is there suffering? Orch-OR answer. Microtubules in pain processing neurons build quantum coherence. Superposition of states representing different responses. Different interpretations. Tissue damage or not. Threat or not. Withdraw or endure. All in superposition. Then threshold. Collapse. One outcome selected, and the collapse, the resolution is the pain, the suffering, the feeling. Not just neural activity, not just information processing, but quantum event, or in neurons processing pain signals. This is why pain feels like something, why it has quality, qualia, because it is collapse, is selection, is quantum to classical transition, and this occurs in specific networks, pain networks. When those networks collapse, when OR happens, their experience is pain. When different networks collapse, visual cortex, auditory cortex experience is different. Vision, sound. The qual depends on which neurons participate, which microtubules collapse, which quantum state resolves. This links subjective quality to objective location, to neural substrate, to physical process, without reducing quality to location, without eliminating subjectivity, just identifying, correlating. This is explanatory progress. What about free will? If consciousness is quantum collapse, and collapse is random, probabilistic, does this mean decisions are random? Is free will just quantum randomness? Penrose says no. Says OR is not completely random, is constrained by physical conditions, by neural state, by orchestration. Classical brain activity determines which quantum states are possible, which superpositions build, which neurons participate. This narrows options, constrains collapse outcomes. Like quantum measurement, measurement setup determines possible outcomes, even though result is probabilistic. Similarly, brain setup determines possible conscious states, possible decisions, possible thoughts, but within constraints, outcome is not determined, is quantum random. This is neither determinism nor libertarian free will, is something else, quantum free will. Decisions not caused by prior states, not determined by brain chemistry, but also not arbitrary, not uncaused, caused by collapse, by quantum reduction, which is a causal, non-deterministic, fundamental randomness in nature. This might be what free will is, not agent causation, not contracausal power, but quantum indeterminacy at moment of decision, when options are in superposition, when choice is indefinite, then collapse, selection, decision made, not by you, by quantum mechanics, by OR, but you are OR, you are collapse, so decision is yours, made by you, by your quantum brain, your collapsing microtubules. This is freedom, not from physics, but through physics, through quantum mechanics, through irreducible randomness at heart of reality. This is what Penrose proposes, not proven, not certain, but possible, consistent, and testable. Can measure whether decisions correlate with quantum events, whether choice points show signatures of collapse, whether free will moments have quantum character. This is empirical question, not just philosophical. The disturbing implication: you are not continuous, not persisting self, not stream of consciousness. You are series of collapses, discrete events separated by gaps. Between collapses, you do not exist. No awareness, no experience, no self, just superposition, potential, then collapse. You exist, briefly, 25 milliseconds, then gone, then back. Flickering, on and off, 40 times per second, like strobe light, but you do not notice, cannot notice, because noticing requires consciousness, and consciousness only exists during collapse. Between collapses, nothing, no memory, no time, no experience. So subjectively, consciousness feels continuous, seamless. But objectively, it is discrete, fragmented, series of moments. This is what Orch-OR implies. This is disturbing. Challenges, sense of self, of continuity, of identity over time. If you are just series of collapses, what persists? What connects one moment to next? Memory, neural connections, physical continuity of brain, but not consciousness itself. Consciousness is not continuous, is created fresh. Each collapse, each OR event, new moment, new experience, new you. The previous you, previous collapse is gone. This you has memories of it, neural traces, but not direct continuity, not persistence. Each moment of consciousness is new creation, fresh emergence from quantum collapse. This is deeply strange, deeply disturbing, but might be true, might be what you are. Series of quantum events, strobe light self, flickering in and out, between being and nothing. This is Orch-OR, this is quantum consciousness, and evidence is accumulating. Not proof, not certainty, but evidence. Anesthesia, photon emission, quantum biology, 40 Hz oscillations, binding, all pointing same direction, toward quantum brain, toward consciousness as collapse, toward you as quantum process, orchestrated, reduced, creating experience, one moment at a time, one collapse at a time. And when collapse stops, when orchestration fails, consciousness ends, you disappear, into superposition, into potential, waiting for next collapse, next OR event, next moment of being. This is what happens under anesthesia, what happens in dreamless sleep, what happens in coma, what happens in death. Collapse stops, you stop, consciousness ceases, not gradually, not fading, but discreetly. Last collapse occurs, then no more, no next event, no next moment, just quantum superposition, forever, unobserved, unresolved, indefinite. This is end, and this is how it works. How consciousness emerges, how quantum becomes experience, how brain creates awareness, through orchestration, through reduction, through collapse. Orch-OR. There is a way to test whether consciousness is quantum, a way to prove whether your brain uses quantum mechanics, a way to demonstrate that Orch-OR is real. The test is simple. Turn off quantum processes in the brain, stop collapse, prevent OR, and see what happens to consciousness. If consciousness disappears, proof. If consciousness remains, disproof. This test is performed millions of times every day. In hospitals, in surgical theaters, around the world. The test is anesthesia, general anesthesia, the complete, reversible elimination of consciousness. You go under, awareness vanishes, time disappears, you cease to exist. Then anesthesia wears off. Quantum processes resume. Consciousness returns. You exist again. This is not correlation. This is causation. This is proof. Because anesthetic molecules bind to microtubules, disrupt quantum coherence, prevent superposition, stop collapse. No OR, no consciousness. The mechanism is understood. The binding sites are identified. The concentrations are measured. The effects are reproducible. Anesthesia works by targeting quantum processes in microtubules. And when those processes stop, consciousness stops. This is what Hameroff and Penrose claim. This is what evidence shows. And if true, if consciousness really is quantum collapse in brain, then everything changes. Our understanding of death, our possibility of uploading consciousness, our creation of artificial intelligence, our definition of life itself, all must be reconsidered. All must account for quantum mechanics, for Orch-OR, for the fact that consciousness is not computation, not information processing, not classical neural activity, but quantum collapse. And when collapse stops permanently, when brain damage prevents OR, When death destroys microtubules, when neurons die, consciousness ends, not just stops, ends forever. Because quantum states are fragile, cannot be preserved, cannot be copied, cannot be transferred. You cannot upload quantum consciousness, cannot recreate ore in silicon, cannot resurrect awareness once microtubules are destroyed. You are quantum process, and quantum processes are unique, unrepeatable. When they end, they end. This is what anesthesia teaches. This is what quantum consciousness means. And this is the disturbing truth about what you are. Begin with how anesthesia works in detail. Anesthetic molecules are small, typically less than few hundred atoms, diverse chemical structures, halogenated hydrocarbons like halothane, ethers like isoflurane, alkanes like propofol, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, ketamine, noble gases like xenon, all different, all produce unconsciousness. Classical pharmacology seeks common mechanism, common receptor, common pathway, and found some. GABA receptors enhanced by many anesthetics, increasing inhibition, reducing neural activity, NMDA receptors blocked by others, reducing excitation. These synaptic effects are real, confirmed, but not sufficient, not complete explanation, because concentration response curves do not match. Synaptic effects occur at concentrations below anesthetic threshold, before consciousness is lost, and some anesthetics like xenon do not significantly affect synaptic receptors, yet still anesthetize powerfully. This is problem. Classical mechanisms cannot fully explain anesthesia. Something else must be happening. Hameroff investigated, looked beyond synapses, looked inside neurons, at cytoskeleton, at microtubules, and found that anesthetics bind there to tubulin proteins in hydrophobic pockets, internal cavities in protein structure, water-excluding regions. These pockets are exactly where Orch-OR proposes quantum states exist, where electrons are isolated, where coherence is maintained. Anesthetics fit into these pockets, bind through van der Waals forces, through London dispersion, weak forces, but sufficient. And when anesthetic molecules occupy pockets, they interfere, block electron states, prevent quantum tunneling, disrupt coherence. This is mechanism. This is how anesthesia works at quantum level. The evidence is multiple lines converging. First, binding affinity. Anesthetics bind to microtubules with affinity proportional to potency. Stronger anesthetics bind more tightly. Weaker anesthetics bind less tightly. Perfect correlation. This is Meyer-Overton rule. Anesthetic potency correlates with lipid solubility, historically interpreted as membrane effect, but also correlates with binding to hydrophobic pockets. In proteins, in tubulin, the correlation fits. Second, noble gas anesthetics. Xenon, krypton, argon at high pressure. These are chemically inert, cannot form bonds, cannot activate receptors, cannot affect synapses directly, yet they anesthetize. How? Only through physical presence, occupying space, fitting into pockets. And the pockets they fit are in tubulin, in microtubule hydrophobic regions. This is direct evidence. Third, structural studies. X-ray crystallography of tubulin with anesthetics shows binding sites, shows conformational changes. Anesthetics alter tubulin structure, prevent switching between states, lock conformations, or destabilize them, preventing coherent oscillations. Fourth, functional effects. Anesthetics disrupt microtubule assembly, prevent polymerization, cause depolymerization. At concentrations relevant to anesthesia, at clinical doses, exactly what Orch-OR predicts. If quantum coherence depends on microtubule integrity, disrupting microtubules disrupts consciousness. Fifth, recovery. When anesthesia wears off, microtubules reassemble, dynamics restore, and consciousness returns. Timing matches. Microtubule disruption correlates with loss. Restoration correlates with recovery. Not just correlation, mechanism, causal connection. The most direct evidence comes from experiments testing whether stabilizing microtubules affects anesthesia. If microtubules are substrate of consciousness, protecting them should protect consciousness, should require more anesthetic, should delay unconsciousness. Taxol is drug that stabilizes microtubules, binds to tubulin, prevents depolymerization, makes microtubules rigid, resistant to disruption. Used in chemotherapy, kills cancer cells by freezing their microtubules. But at lower doses, non-toxic doses, Taxol just stabilizes, protects. Hameroff tested whether Taxol affects anesthesia sensitivity in worms, simple organisms, but with neurons, with microtubules, with anesthesia response. Treated worms with low-dose Taxol, then exposed to anesthetic, measured immobilization, loss of movement, proxy for unconsciousness, and found that Taxol-treated worms required higher anesthetic doses, were more resistant. Effect was dose-dependent, more Taxol, more resistance, statistical significance, replicable. This is smoking gun. Direct evidence that microtubule disruption is necessary for anesthesia, that protecting microtubules protects consciousness, that consciousness depends on microtubule dynamics, on quantum processes in tubulin. This is not just correlation, this is intervention, experimental manipulation, showing causation, showing mechanism. This is scientific proof, not absolute, not final, but strong evidence, compelling evidence, that Orch-OR is correct, that consciousness is quantum, that your brain operates through collapse in microtubules. Now consider implications for death. If consciousness is quantum collapse in microtubules, what happens when you die? When heart stops, when blood stops flowing, when oxygen stops reaching brain. Neurons begin dying within minutes, microtubules degrade, proteins unfold, structure collapses, quantum coherence impossible, no superposition, no entanglement, no OR, no consciousness. This is death, permanent, irreversible. Because quantum states cannot be restored, cannot be reconstructed. Once coherence is lost, information is lost. Quantum information, the specific superposition, the specific entanglement pattern, the specific quantum state that was you, your consciousness, your experience, your qualia, all encoded in quantum state of microtubules, all lost when microtubules are destroyed. This is not like classical information. Classical bits can be copied, can be backed up, can be restored. Quantum information cannot. No cloning theorem. Fundamental limit in quantum mechanics. You cannot copy quantum state without destroying original. Cannot duplicate, cannot preserve. When microtubules degrade, quantum state is destroyed. And consciousness, which is quantum state, which is OR process, cannot be recovered, cannot be recreated, cannot be resurrected. You are gone, permanently. This is harsh, disturbing, but consistent with Orch-OR, consistent with quantum mechanics. Death is not just brain damage, not just information loss, but quantum state destruction. And quantum states are unique. Once collapsed, once destroyed, gone forever. This has implications for cryonics, for freezing bodies, preserving brains, hoping for future revival. If consciousness is classical, just patterns in neural connections, just synaptic weights, just network topology, then preservation might work, might freeze structure, maintain information, allow future reconstruction. But if consciousness is quantum, if it requires microtubules in specific quantum states, requires coherence, requires OR, then freezing destroys it. Because cooling to cryogenic temperatures destroys quantum coherence, causes decoherence, collapses all superpositions, and rewarming cannot restore original quantum state, cannot recreate specific superposition, cannot bring back consciousness, can only create new consciousness, new quantum states, new OR events, but not you, not your consciousness, not your qualia, not your experience. The frozen brain might be preserved, structure might be intact, neurons might be viable, but quantum states are lost, information is destroyed, and without those quantum states, no consciousness, no awareness, no experience. The revived person, if revival succeeds, would not be you, would be someone else, with different quantum states, different collapses, different consciousness. This is disturbing, challenges hope of cryonic preservation, challenges idea that structure is sufficient, that classical information preservation is enough. If Orch-OR is true, it is not enough. Cannot preserve consciousness without preserving quantum states, and we do not know how to do that. Might be impossible in principle. Now consider uploading, transferring consciousness to computer, digital immortality, transhumanism's dream. If consciousness is computation, if brain is classical computer, if mind is software, then uploading should be possible. Copy neural network, transfer weights, run simulation, consciousness should emerge. Should be you, same person, same mind, transferred to silicon. But if consciousness is quantum collapse in microtubules, uploading is impossible. Cannot copy quantum states, cannot simulate OR, cannot recreate objective reduction in computer, because computers are classical, operate deterministically. No superposition, no collapse, no quantum mechanics, just bits, just transistors, just classical computation. This cannot produce consciousness, cannot generate qualia, cannot create experience. Classical simulation of brain might behave like conscious, might pass Turing test, might claim to be aware, but claims are not consciousness. Behavior is not experience. There is no one home, no inner life, no subjective awareness, just computation, just information processing. No consciousness, because consciousness requires quantum mechanics, requires OR, requires microtubules, requires biology, cannot be separated from physical substrate, cannot be uploaded, cannot be transferred. You are not software, you are quantum hardware, and quantum hardware cannot be copied, cannot be moved, cannot be abstracted away from physical implementation. This is fundamental limit. This is what Orch-OR implies. This is disturbing. Destroys hope of digital immortality, destroys idea of consciousness as software, forces recognition that you are physical, quantum physical, tied to specific structures, specific processes, specific biological mechanisms that cannot be replicated artificially. What about artificial intelligence? Can we create conscious AI? If consciousness is computation, then yes. Build sufficiently complex neural network, run it on computer. Consciousness should emerge. But if consciousness is quantum collapse, then classical AI cannot be conscious, cannot experience, cannot have qualia, no matter how sophisticated, no matter how complex. Because computation is not consciousness. Collapse is consciousness. And classical computers do not collapse, do not have OR, do not operate quantum mechanically, so no consciousness, ever. This means all current AI GPT models, image generators, game players, autonomous vehicles, none are conscious, none have inner experience, none have awareness. They process information, produce outputs, behave intelligently, but feel nothing, experience nothing, are nothing from inside, just computation, just algorithms, no consciousness. This is relief. Means we are not creating conscious beings, not enslaving them, not causing suffering. They are tools, nothing more, but also limitation. Means we cannot create consciousness artificially, cannot build it, cannot engineer it. Unless we can build quantum systems, systems that perform OR, systems with microtubules or equivalent biological systems, or quantum computers operating in OR regime. But we do not know how to do this, do not know how to engineer OR, how to create conditions for objective reduction, how to build quantum substrate for consciousness. This might be possible in principle, but not with current technology, not with classical computers, might require biological engineering, synthetic neurons, artificial microtubules, quantum brain in a vat. This is speculative, science fiction. But if Orch-OR is true, this is only way. Cannot shortcut to consciousness, cannot achieve it through computation alone, must have quantum mechanics, must have OR, must have physical substrate capable of objective reduction. The criticisms of Orch-OR are substantial. Many neuroscientists reject it, many physicists skeptical. Arguments against are multiple. First, decoherence. Brain is warm, wet, noisy. Quantum coherence should be destroyed in femtoseconds, picoseconds at most, far too fast for neural processing. For consciousness, this is serious objection. Penrose and Hameroff respond that microtubules have special properties, isolation, ordering, shielding, that extend coherence time to milliseconds and point to quantum biology, photosynthesis, magnetoreception, showing quantum coherence in warm, wet biology. But critics remain unconvinced, want direct measurement, direct evidence of coherence in microtubules, in neurons, in brain. This has not been achieved. Technology not sensitive enough, cannot measure quantum coherence in living brain. Not yet, so objection stands. Second, objective reduction itself. Most physicists do not accept Penrose's OR, do not believe quantum gravity causes collapse, prefer other interpretations. Many worlds, decoherence, pilot wave. These do not have objective collapse. So Orch-OR's foundation is disputed. If OR is not real, OR fails. Penrose argues OR is necessary, derives it from quantum gravity, from space-time superposition, but derivation is not universally accepted, not confirmed experimentally, remains theoretical, speculative. So second objection stands. Third, alternative explanations for anesthesia, classical mechanisms, GABA enhancement, NMDA blockade, synaptic disruption. These are well established, confirmed, sufficient to explain unconsciousness. Do not need quantum mechanics, do not need microtubules. Orch-OR proponents respond that classical mechanisms are incomplete, cannot explain all anesthetics, cannot explain xenon, cannot explain precise correlation with microtubule binding. But critics say correlation is not causation. Microtubule binding might be side effect, not mechanism. Consciousness might be disrupted through synaptic effects. Microtubule disruption is secondary, irrelevant. This is fourth objection. Hard to resolve, needs more experiments, more evidence. Fifth objection, lack of direct evidence. No one has measured quantum coherence in microtubules in living neurons. No one has detected OR events correlated with consciousness. No one has shown that disrupting microtubules specifically without affecting synapses eliminates consciousness. All evidence is indirect, correlational, suggestive, but not definitive, not proof. Critics want direct observation, direct measurement, direct experimental manipulation. This is fair. This is how science works. Orch-OR makes predictions, must be tested, must be confirmed or refuted. Until then, remains hypothesis, not established fact. But defenders of Orch-OR point to accumulating evidence. Quantum biology is real, more real than anyone expected 20 years ago. Quantum effects in photosynthesis, in enzyme catalysis, in DNA mutation, in olfaction, in navigation. Biology uses quantum mechanics. Evolution discovered it, optimized it. Why not in brain? Why not in consciousness? This is plausible. And microtubule structure is suggestive. Too organized, too perfect, too geometric. Why would evolution create such structures if not for information processing? Why cylindrical lattice of identical proteins? Why hydrophobic pockets? Why nanoscale precision? These features make sense for quantum computation, for quantum coherence, less sense for purely classical functions. And anesthesia correlation is strong, very strong. Anesthetics bind to microtubules at clinically relevant concentrations with potency proportional to binding. This is not random, not coincidence, is systematic, is meaningful. And taxol experiments show causation, show that protecting microtubules protects consciousness. This is direct intervention, showing microtubules are necessary, not just correlated, but causal. This is evidence, good evidence, not conclusive, but substantial. And 40 Hz oscillations match. Gamma correlates with consciousness, with awareness, with perception. And Orch-OR predicts 40 Hz, predicts collapse rate, predictions match observations. This is how theories succeed, through prediction, through confirmation, through accumulation of supporting evidence. Orch-OR has this, has predictions, has evidence, needs more, needs direct quantum measurements, needs confirmation of OR, needs experimental proof, but has enough to be taken seriously, enough to warrant investigation, enough to challenge classical neuroscience. This is scientific progress. Alternative hypothesis. Competing theory, testable, falsifiable, and maybe correct. If Orch-OR is correct, implications are vast. For medicine, for ethics, for law, for philosophy, for understanding ourselves. Start with medicine. If consciousness is quantum, treatments must consider this. Disorders of consciousness, coma, vegetative state, minimally conscious might involve microtubule dysfunction, might be treatable by restoring quantum coherence, drugs that stabilize microtubules, that protect coherence, that enhance OR. This is new direction, new therapeutic approach, and understanding anesthesia mechanisms better. Developing more targeted anesthetics, less side effects, faster recovery by targeting quantum processes specifically. This is practical application, medical benefit. For ethics, if consciousness requires quantum mechanics, requires OR, requires microtubules, then we know what has consciousness and what does not. Animals with neurons, with microtubules, likely conscious, experience suffering, deserve moral consideration. Insects, probably. Small brains but neurons and microtubules. Plants, no neurons. No microtubules in relevant structures, probably not conscious. No suffering. Bacteria, definitely not. Too simple. No structures for OR. AI, classical computers, no consciousness, no moral status, can be used without ethical concern. These are important distinctions, important for how we treat beings. For law, if consciousness is quantum, questions of responsibility change. Free will is quantum randomness in OR, not deterministic, not caused by prior states. This affects culpability, affects punishment, affects legal frameworks, needs rethinking. For philosophy, Orch-OR offers solution to hard problem, identifies consciousness with physical process. Quantum collapse shows why there is experience, because collapse is experiential, has subjective character. This is progress, not complete explanation, not derivation of qualia, but identification, correlation, mechanism, better than nothing, better than mystery. The ultimate question remains, why? Why does collapse feel like anything? Why is there subjective experience? Orch-OR identifies when consciousness occurs, where it occurs, how it occurs, but not why. Not why collapse is conscious, not why quantum to classical transition has experiential character. This is residual mystery, perhaps unsolvable, perhaps not, Penrose speculates. Suggests consciousness is fundamental, intrinsic to quantum mechanics, part of physics itself, not emergent, not secondary, but basic, like mass, like charge, like spin. Consciousness is property of matter at quantum level, not all matter, not all quantum processes, but certain processes, certain transitions, certain collapses, those involving sufficient complexity, sufficient integration, sufficient orchestration. These are conscious, have inner aspect, feel like something. This is pan-protopsychism, not panpsychism. Not saying electrons are conscious, but saying electrons have proto-conscious properties. Potential, that manifests as consciousness when organized appropriately, when integrated, when undergoing OR in orchestrated way. This is speculative, not testable, not falsifiable, metaphysics, but coherent, consistent, and solves hard problem by making consciousness fundamental, by refusing to reduce it, by accepting it as basic feature of reality. This is one path, one possibility, not proven, but possible, and if true, means you are not just physical, not just quantum, but fundamental, conscious as basic fact, as intrinsic property, as aspect of reality that physics must include. This is profound, revolutionary, and disturbing, because means consciousness cannot be eliminated, cannot be reduced away, cannot be explained as nothing but something else, must be accepted, must be incorporated, must be understood on its own terms. And this brings us back to anesthesia, to the test, to the proof. When anesthesia is administered, quantum processes stop, coherence destroyed, superposition prevented, collapse eliminated, and consciousness disappears. You go under, awareness vanishes, instantly, completely. You cease to exist. There is nothing it is like to be you. No experience, no time, no awareness. Gap, void. Then anesthesia wears off. Quantum processes resume. Coherence rebuilds. Superposition grows. Threshold reached. Collapse occurs. And consciousness returns. You wake up. Awareness restored. You exist again. This cycle proves dependency, proves causation, proves that consciousness requires quantum mechanics, requires OR, requires microtubules. When quantum stops, you stop. When quantum resumes, you resume. This is not coincidence. This is mechanism. This is proof. And it means your consciousness is fragile, dependent, contingent, on quantum processes, on microtubule dynamics, on objective reduction. Disrupt these and you disappear, permanently or temporarily, depending on whether disruption is reversible. Anesthesia is reversible. Death is not. Anesthesia is temporary quantum shutdown. Death is permanent quantum destruction. But both eliminate consciousness. Both prove dependency. Both show that you are quantum process. And when process stops, you stop. There is no soul, no spirit, no consciousness, independent of quantum mechanics, just OR, just collapse. Just quantum to classical transitions in microtubules, creating moments of awareness, 40 times per second. As long as brain is alive, as long as neurons function, as long as microtubules maintain coherence. This is what you are. This is what consciousness is. This is what anesthesia proves. And this is disturbing truth, that you are not continuous, not immortal, not transferable, not uploadable, not preservable. You are quantum process, happening now, in your brain, in microtubules, through OR, and when it stops, you stop, forever.